Gotta clean the space. Gotta clean the space. There's a lot of muck in this Ethernet. And gotta back in the friends. Gotta back in the friends. Gosh, there's so much going on. So bear with me while I go through some strange things that even I've learned. But happy new moon. Happy moon with Mars and Pluto. Yes, in Aquarius. However, it jumps into Pisces, which makes me wonder what the efficacies or efficiencies of data relay on these satellites is, as that has been called into question in prior readings. But not just a new moon with all of these friends and all of these energies and distinctions, but a solar eclipse. The frog swallows the moon. Interesting as well, given the medicine of the frog about happiness, but also commodified and misused and abused to be a cycle of trauma in the ways in which we utilize that medicine. That eclipse and its ring of fire will be bright in the sky, and though we have very literal elements of fire, there's so much more beneath that. So I beg you, maybe your spirit begs you as well, not to take things at face value. Other than, I suppose, people. Believe them when they show you, eh? But as far as symbol, dig beneath the surface. With that solar eclipse and the new moon, just prior, technically we're on the eve of, right? And so yesterday, Neptune and Saturn made a perfect conjunction, which is an interesting level of intensity. And not just that, but Saturn progresses on and begins to move into Aries, if not already passing that line, which is going to be very interesting, but we'll come up again in a second. On top of that Neptune-Saturn conjunction, and their cusping of the line between Pisces and Aries, and sort of deliberating that information, especially as though people have predicted Uranus would rush into Gemini, has not, will not, and I believe it's almost like it's waiting for us to figure shit out, perhaps even impatiently so. Hence the shaking of the earth. Just since the beginning of the year, I believe there's been 9 earthquakes. And often when I channel in these spaces, I can feel it shaking beneath the surface. So if you feel that as well, I urge you to find your still point. Despite all of these Aries energies, I also think it's a key understanding that we recognize beyond the 12 internal vortex of Western astrology is the 13th sign inclusion, which would then give us a more accurate mathematical unveiling, opening to, progression to those energies, in which case the crocodile and the wind, or the owl and the heron, in which case both carry wind, but not just east and west, but throughout, and every wind has its source, and every wind has its message to wherever it goes to or lies to. And so with that, interestingly enough, the Aries in Egyptian astrology, from what I've been able to dabble into, is the son of sheep. Is the son of sheep. So though we put all of this weight into horns and aggression, it is simply the son of sheep. Even the idea of, alpha male, disproved, it only occurs in captivity. And the idea of that forcefulness is really just a stubbornness and a following, rather than a thinking for the self. Even in frequencies, alpha frequencies of the brain is impressionable. Good for learning, yes, but because it's absorbent. Like a sponge, it absorbs and it is impressionable. So mind how impressionable you are in this time, and mind the source of these impressions, lest they not be your own. Especially with everything that we're finding out, how many dirty hands have been in ties of time and society, and the ways in which it's constructed and fabricated our understandings of. Not just that either. I love those not planets, but also astral bodies or star bodies. Comet C passes the following day after this moon, which will be February 17th. It is February 16th today. The 18th, Comet C passes this collection of energies, and passes through and with the constellations Cetus and Eridanus, which I had never heard of before. Dug into them a little bit, and very interesting. Cetus, discovered in 1596, again, despite all these fire energies, has more to do with water. Is described as the whale. Is described as the sea monster. And again, we have these deep, sort of Pisces-ridden natures, and water energies, despite all of the heat, despite all of the superficial heat, because there is going to be also a lot of mercurial energy, which is about our understanding of that heat. Interestingly enough, the rise of information about the science of fires, or the science behind firefighting, which, who would have thunk? I didn't know. It's not just pouring water on it, eh? Eridanus is, again, depending on which hemisphere, like where I am, northern hemisphere, we won't see it in Cetus, so a lurking monster underneath the surface. But a lot of this definitely, in general, will be more prevalent for southern hemispheres. And that I'll add to in a moment as well. But Eridanus is identified as the serpent at Orion's feet, which interestingly also makes me think of other, like, Vedic astrologies and Hindu deities that are stepping on serpents or standing on serpents, or even the typical American "don't tread on me," despite many nationalists being bent over begging for tread. It is also the serpent swimming the Nile, and the brightest star at its river's end is not just the end. There's a galaxy at the end of that. So for every ending, there is a new beginning. When one door closes, many open. And if you feel that the front door and the back door of whatever possibility or dream you have are closed, then perhaps it is time to look for a window of new sights and of new perspectives. Let's see, Comet C also passes with M77, or the Squid Galaxy, which is an interesting constellation, because squids are these ancient intelligent creatures that we just do not understand. And I think in story, weave so much toward, ancient knowledge, and also very much this sort of future-ridden identity of, aliens or what have you. much like our own understandings of dinosaurs and you know, birds or crocodiles. They've been around for so long. They've seen so much more than I think we can even grasp. And so when we feel at odds with solution, or like we cannot be creative enough, like we cannot see beyond, turn to the elements, turn to animals. They have seen many situations like the ones we find ourselves in before. If you feel misunderstood, take it to the water, take it to the trees. They'll remind you that you are not that different, that they have seen stranger things before. The Squid Galaxy is also a black hole, which is cool because I think that's why, I think that very much adds to why there's so much like talk about time jumping and, you know, timeline shifting and what have you, because we are able to recognize the center of the Milky Way and also its anti-center or antipodal points. All of that sounds kind of wildy. Moon and Mercury will be conjunct to the 18th, and a lunar occultation of Mercury, which again brings me back to these mercurial understandings, which I think wants us to know more about the qualities of fire rather than just the fire itself. Again, where it comes from, where it intends on going, rather than just taking it at face value. Interestingly enough, this is so directly in line with a meditation that I had today, in which myself and a friend were able to explore seemingly antithetical topics as far as rage or love, and to ultimately discover that perhaps rage is in and of itself a divine passion that needs to be directed, that can be love just as easily as it can be rage if we are not careful with our balancing or our juggling. And that understanding of it, you know, yes, your rage is sacred. Now what do you do with it? Do you destroy yourself, or do you build something new? Mercury will be at its highest altitude incoming. And oh gosh, there's so many notes. Cultural objects, B cluster and 44. Honey, you know, frequency, vibration, subtlety, collective thinking, very much so. So beyond all of the planets, the stars, and the energies that the moon has passed, that all of this energy is passing, is like walking through a crowd and like greeting all of these ancient energies and opening up your heart and your ears to understanding what it is that they have to offer beyond superficial stimulus, beyond craving, beyond compulsion, beyond impulse that is often so attached to fire and misunderstanding. The 19th, moon and Saturn will be conjunct. 26th, conjunct with Venus and Mercury, or conjunction of Venus and Mercury. The 23rd and 45 and the Pleiades of the Seven Sisters, which again, something altogether new, but also informed by the ancients. Even in occultations that the moon has had, speaks so much to a weaving of these energies in so many ways, and the ways in which the stars themselves and their brightest points inform. I'll get to a little bit more of that in a minute. Before February is over, the moon and Jupiter will conjunct again as well, which is yet another water energy, because Jupiter is still in Cancer. A very high-powered planet, a very long rotation, a very, like the longest arms around a thing, sort of parental kind of energy encompassing. and integrating or understanding or altogether ignoring, depending on what you want to do with the energy. If you think you know best, and will oppose the sun at its brightest point to the earth. So this is a great time for questioning. This is a great time for curiosity. This is a great time for pacing oneself in understanding, but also excavation of these understandings and knowing where exactly they come from. As far as lunar occultations that I had mentioned before, Beta Tauri happened in January, but will be happening again after this new moon. In which case, there's, yes, a lot of, it's the tip of the horn, it's the bull, blah, 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 blah. But it had also served as such a navigating star for Southern Hemisphere and like Polynesian mythology, or that general corner of the world, the way New Zealanders understood it. Let me see if I can actually find what I was looking at a few days ago about that. Let's see. Oh, yes. So glad I keep all these tabs open. In ancient Persia was one of 4 royal stars. In Nigeria is the mother hen, and the Pleiades, her chicks. Where was in Maori, was the herald of the digging season, which is very much again beneath the surface. It's interesting how maybe Southern Hemispheres that have a clearer vision of this see it in less of a grasping or forceful or butting against kind of energy. In Burang tradition, chants and beats time to dance as a landmark. And the Inuai call the constellation the spirit of the polar bear. Ooh, this one was really interesting. In Navajo, the constellation pinching or doubtful stars is located in the Hyades star cluster. It's associated with Del Yeche Atse Etsosi. Refers to doubtful or pinching stars. Pinching may allude to closeness of the twin stars, while doubtful may refer to their parentage. The bright star is the fire of the twin stars. There is an interesting story, which is part of a larger, more comprehensive story, according to the storytellers, where the sisters were arguing over which of them were the rightful parents of the beautiful girls were arguing about who were the rightful parents. And in Navajo, the names of the girls loosely translated as long life and happiness. Interesting. Ain't that all what we're looking for, huh? These two terms embody the whole of life in terms of complementarity. When the girls attained maturity, the sun visited them, and in time they gave birth to children. One of the sisters gave birth to a son, who became one of the monsters in a story. One of the monsters who terrorized people on Earth. The other sister gave birth to twin sons, who became the hero twins in other Navajo oral traditions. So again, interesting, we kind of have this split, and it is very much about the direction that we choose to take it. We could self-destruct. We could implode if we want to go that direction. Or we could excavate, heal, and perhaps be able to see an entirely different way of moving. If we understand the elements, their chemical compositions, and the interactions and our responsibility to, far beyond just superficial value. Beta Tauri is also seen in Vedic astrology as Agni, or in reference to the fire of Agni, which again is less so just fire wielding and more so about its stable central point of sacred fire and of desire. The ways in which we move with aggression and rage ultimately dishonors the heart's truest desires. It sacrifices itself to the ego. And is that the kind of sacrifice that we're trying to make? Beyond Beta Tauri from past and what will be present, Regulus was occulted in February, which is very much the heart of Leo, and offers, I think, an integral, wise perspective. Like the Strength card, the lion isn't attacking, the lion is not even subdued, the lion is befriended. The lion is aware of the lack of fear in the character that exists within the card. And so there is no need for the lion to roar or to bare teeth. It finds great calmness in that. Also occulted, Antares is the heart of Scorpio, Sigma Sagittarii, or the Milky Way center, and then Beta Tauri again. So all of this very much, the ways in which our thoughts and our feelings are nurtured, the ways in which we move with nature or nurture, and often what we call our nature is in fact the nurturing of cycles of abuse. This is the great misunderstanding with primal nature, primal consciousness, based very much in a Western affluent speciesist hierarchy, which is also being whittled down and stripped back as we understand that the nervous systems of animals, especially sea creatures, in particular, as far as I've learned, possess a very intricate and advanced nervous system, which makes one wonder if they are in fact capable of even more complex emotions and language and communication than we bear to give them credit for, because we, as humans, love to think that we are the best and the only, when in fact we are simply a part of a grand weaving of things, which is, again, Beta Tauri's influence in Polynesian mythology is this weaving of ideas and a strengthening of the cord that ties you north, rather than a cord of constriction, rather than a cord of bondage. Not just Aries and the Son of Sheep, but Venus and Mercury's relationship has been, which I love because it's very much ideas and curiosity and questioning, which is something that is very much being attacked by the system. That's why people grapple to, religious dogma and, cult mentality, because questioning is seen as a threat, and is very much based in gender appropriative politics, where even femininity or speaking up or questioning is deemed feminine and therefore subordinate, which is also why the military and the government or the cult mentality of MAGA operates the way that it does, because much like the mafia, it's a test of loyalty, not of intelligence or integrity. They want to know that you'll pull the trigger first and not ask questions at all, which will, in fact, with Mars and Pluto, I think serve quite an identity crisis for masculine energies, for Mars-ridden energies, for fire-driven energies, for actionable energies, and occurs very much as a identity crisis in conflict as Pluto reorients into a new paradigm. And oh, have I seen it in so many ways, shapes, and forms. All of this to say that fire is about transmutation. especially with our understandings of the year of the horse and the fire horse, as this crash through the wall and blah blah blah, force it and do it and no, no. Again, just the surface. Horses are like, that's great perspective if you're afraid of horses. Horses are incredibly strong, incredibly powerful, could absolutely do incredible damage. However, horses are also kind of spooked easily, and they're very sensitive creatures. If you've ever looked into the eye of a horse, it understands so much more than I think even we do, or that we're aware of it understanding. All of that strength is also intricacy of nervous system stimulation, which is why when you circumvent a horse, or if you find yourself, walking around a horse, you kind of have to make sure that it's aware of where you are, with subtle touch or slight touch, or in riding horses, they feel your fear. They can feel your confidence and your groundedness, or they can feel your fear, and they will test those boundaries because they are creatures of their own right, and they possess an incredible capacity to move and think for themselves. As far as transmuting the fire, let us understand the not just intricacies, but the qualities of fire. What are the qualities of fire? Where does it come from? Where does it root? Where is it going? The qualities of the smoke in the air, even. If you've ever had a campfire and you've thrown bullshit into the fire, and you acknowledge, or you recognize that the smoke has changed colors, or has changed thickness, or what have you. These are the qualities of fire, and it depends on what you're putting into the fire. That being said, let the fire pass over you, so that you can be that much more in tune with those qualities of fire, because ash is how we rise, much like phoenix rise from the ash. But not just that, ash possesses the same, not disinfectant, but like sterile properties as fire. You put fire to a blade to sterilize it and like cut up some shit. Ash, if you rub ash on something, has the same qualities of that fire. In which case, we do not need to put our hand in the fire or become the fire and give ourselves to it without understanding it fully. We can let the fire pass and excavate and understand and utilize that ash for the same qualities of that fire. This is very much understanding the fire without self-implosion. Very much understanding the fire without explosiveness, really. Like a smooth warming, like even baking bread. You preheat the friggin' oven. You pre-warm the pot, or the whatever the thing is that you cook bread in. I guess it is a pot. But that quality of heat has to be stabilized in order to allow for the greatest growth. So consider these things. Consider these things. Give your ash to the moon and to the water, and let the fire just be bright. Don't let it burn through. We don't have to burn holes through ourselves just to be seen, just to be heard. In fact, the more we understand the qualities of our fire, the more undeniable that sense of being seen or heard will become. And so back to this moon with Mars and Pluto and that sort of identity crisis, it being in Aquarius, or the edges of Aquarius, is very much an intellectual maturation. That is not to say pure intuition. Intellect can only get us so far, but it is your willingness to go back and to assess what needs to be changed, assess what needs to be pivoted or moved, or assess what actually motivates, assess what the stimulus actually is, and if it has been directed efficiently or if it has been misdirected. This is very literally what we're all finding out about, our understandings of dopamine, our understandings of the impulses that we have with internet and with scrolling, and the way that it's affecting our brains and our hearts and our communication capacities, etc., etc., etc. As it moves into Pisces, it is going to require our knowledge of the water that we are very much in right now. in order to recognize and deal with the fire that will rise as Saturn moves into Aries. And Saturn moving into Aries, Saturn as in small steps, Saturn as in lessons, Saturn as in, weaving lessons, is also going to be dependent and requiring that you remember what you have learned while Saturn was in Pisces. So yes, there's all of this fire prevalent, but it's going to require us to channel these water energies that are also equally, if not more so prevalent, so that we can move through coolly. It's like hot coal walking. You cool the psyche, you cool the mind, you find a stable point, and you find a steady flow, so that in traversing this difficult task, you remain unscathed. That's going to be very difficult for a lot of people to grasp, because most people haven't experienced something like that. But and not even just for literal quality, I think the general capacity of the Western world doesn't understand what ego death is, doesn't understand what it is to humble the self. And so that will be a very interesting time for those that have never had to humble themselves before. And those that do not humble themselves to their own intuition and psyche will be humbled by external forces, for sure. Which I'm hoping for, especially for some bad hats in some high places, you know what I mean? Saturn moving into Aries, very much don't forget what you learned in Pisces. But as time progresses, Neptune will also move into Aries come mid-March. So let me not get too far into that. But Eris and Chiron will conjunct, which will be very much a catalyst for chaos or change, depending on the ways in which you aim to move with that. Do you aim to move with a mathematically incomplete Aries as the son of sheep, impressionable and trapped? Or will you move like the wind? Will you move like a crocodile in a death roll? And even in that, like Wonder Woman kind of costume change, even, which absolutely, it's maybe not easy, but as simple as that, in the ways in which we can, hop timelines or become a different version of ourselves. What is the superhero of you in your mind that you can do a quick spin Wonder Woman change into, that actualizes the lessons that we've learned in the water, so that we may be, again, unscathed in traversing difficult tasks with fire under our feet. With all of that being said, thank you for bearing with me, my friends who are hanging out and watching. I hope that gave you some interesting perspectives into everything that is going on, so that we can find a spiral accumulation and expansion rather than just a starburst explosion of the self. So, we'll pull some cards to see what the moon will have to say, especially with all of these friends. If you are, gosh, hair on my face despite pulling it back, right? If you are new here, because we do have a lot of new homies, however, a lot of them are from TikTok, so they've heard me say this a million times. If you are new here, then you might notice some things are a little different. In which case, yes, I do read tarot. However, I read traditional cartomancy as well. Because while tarot was a game for the elites, and I question that entirely, because the elites don't play games, it is always a front. Cartomancy was how our ancestors outside of those hierarchies were able to stay under the radar and also maintain their knowledge of these energies and these stories. And it does very much innervate very well. However, I think much like time and space intersect, working with numbers and playing cards does give us a little bit more of a literal or body knowledge kind of understanding, and I very much think also plays with time. And so anytime I have read in time, it sort of seems to speed things up. So may it rise all that we need to know to the surface. The other thing that you might notice is that I also take this as an invitation and an opportunity for us to breathe together. If you are a channeler or a reader in some capacity, then cool, it's dope practice and you're probably doing it already. If you are not, you don't have to channel anything, that's my gig. Just be with yourself. It is still an invitation and an opportunity to find the fullest breath in your body, and to perhaps open your heart and your awareness to any sensations that your body has to offer you. Because utmost, our first tool, our first magical tool, our first tool of deep knowing is our body and our breath. And so, with that, my friend, let's rock out. Interesting. Already. Much like we were hanging out, much like there's cards between us, and much like we're together on this strange little ether web, data highway, to and fro. Again, all I ask is that you make your body available to a full breath and make your awareness available to any sensations that arise. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Interesting. Very palpable, very defined, but also like I feel like I can see the ring of fire, which doesn't just exist around the moon at eclipses. There's a ring of fire around the universe because it is in fact expanding too quickly, which brings me back to misunderstandings of, force as if it's power, or, rushing through, or very much an imbalanced masculine perspective of all expansion, all taking in without fully understanding where it is it's coming from, without fully understanding what it is that's wanted. It's craving, it's wantonness, it's colonization, it's expansion with no direction. And so things move too quickly, too fast. And this is not just a philosophical truth, it is in fact a chemical truth, and a celestial truth, as the circle of fire around the galaxy persists. Around our galaxy, this galaxy, because there are many. Ooh, okay, interesting. Bottom of the deck, Queen of Clubs, which is an undertone of fire rising. It is the coals, it is the embers, it is the fire pit as well. But Queen of Clubs isn't the one, isn't just the care, and I mean, damn, okay, it is also the care of it. Not just the wielding of it, not just the showing of it, not just for show, because masculine loves to show off. The Queen of Clubs, I think, also understands that there's a responsibility to maintain, that there's a responsibility to keep, to fire keep, but not fire hold, which, too often is how things move, even in indigenous community, because there's poison in the well, and it is called hierarchy and status. So where do those things lie in you? Are those things that drive you hierarchy and status, or are those things that we're trying to separate ourselves from? It's a deep excavation of the mind, a decolonization of. But the Queen of Clubs not only cares and nurtures for this fire and keeps the fire well so that it can continue to be lit, it is also all that much more capable to rise because of that. It's like you can't just build a fire on like old bullshit, right? You can't. Even with campsites, you have to like clean that space, or you get fined, because it has to be prepared for the next fire. And this is very much the problem with Western energies, with masculine energies, that hoard energy, that hoard wealth, and do not give back. They hoard information, knowledge, wealth, resource, and fail to, return anything to the pond. They refuse to replenish in any capacity. The scam of trickle-down economics is basically a Ponzi scheme, and that is, again, all mask, no fam, all time, no space, all fire, no understanding of the properties of the chemical compositions of. So, how is it that even within us, not just like, yes, patriarchy sucks, but like patriarchy in you is a thing too. How does the masculinity in you create the kind of circumstances where the feminine is able to do the excavation and the nurturing and create the capacity for calm, so that the masculine can rise in truth and integrity rather than in showiness and bravado and force and what have you. Honestly, even the ways in which we run our fucking mouths, the ways in which we push ourselves to a detriment, the ways in which we hold ourselves to standards that are not our own. This is, much like I said as well, love or rage, this is the central point of desire. This is the, in tarot it would be a rod or a torch or something, which is very much also indicative of an offering, which is very much also, not just light for ourselves, but light for others. Are we able to recognize the shadow and also share the light? Nine of Diamonds, Jack of Spades, Two of Diamonds. Interesting. Both of these are very grounded elements. This is also a very soft element given its sword-like or intense mental energy. Also inverted, which is humor being a healing mechanism. Laughter is absolutely a medicine. This Jack of Spades is sort of like novice energy, and I think is very much like not willing to, they're not going to take themselves too seriously, is not going to be dissuaded by trying something new or by learning something new. It's very much their ability to be like, to learn a new tool, to learn a new weapon, to learn a new tool, and to be able to communicate. It makes me think of the Princess Bride too. Like, there's so much humor in that movie. Yes, there's also sword fights, but there's so much humor in that movie that I think is ultimately what that energy wants. How can we communicate? How can we make even our demons laugh, rather than to banish them, rather than to hide them away, or to ignore them because they only get louder. This is very much more lighthearted, and perhaps even toward the self. We take ourselves quite seriously, and I think with everything changing and the pressures that can be pressed upon us, especially Saturn moving into Aries, it does very much add to this like go go go, just do it kind of energy. However, all the better when we remember what we've learned in Pisces, and all the better when we're also able to stop and smell the roses, stop and laugh, stop and turn within to really alchemize the intensities of emotions that press against us in uncomfortable ways, in disuniting ways, in overwhelming ways. That overwhelm can also be inspiration, just like that rage can also be love and desire. But it is the direction that we choose to utilize it in. It is the ways in which we're willing to point our blade. And where's this blade pointed? To the ground, as a grounding circuit. And with both of these earth-ridden elements, not just because they're pretty greens, but because they are diamonds. I switched those. 9 of diamonds coming from not just below the completeness of a cycle, very much a sense of fulfillment, a sense of satisfaction, the 0 at the top of the 9, and an ability to extend beyond the self, or an ability to sort of, what do they do with plants? Propagate. Like if you are a plant, what is it that you want to create? Slightly unlike yourself. And it may be difficult or hard or scary to be like, oh, I gotta cut this like thing off and put it in water. You may feel like you're hurting the plant even. However, it is integral to its growth, and that doesn't make this 9 lose any of its satisfaction or any of its growth. And I think, especially with understandings of the Gregorian calendar, and anybody that may have fallen off with their, resolutions. This is a sense of not even starting over, but like starting anew and then some. Being able to carry what you've learned, leave behind what no longer fits, and be able to build something slightly unlike it, slightly new, slightly different than yourself, like a new baby, like a new, and not literally, but like any inspiration project, pet project, art project is kind of like your little mind baby, and this is very much mind energy, mental capacity, and spiritual energy is very much influenced by that. So do not take the earth too literally. It is just about the completion of a cycle, and this 2 of diamonds is also like just beyond the beginning of a cycle, where it may, even as different as things can be, it may also feel very familiar. It may also feel that much more familiar, which in a great sense of the word is like trying something totally new and then realizing you feel very much at home, realizing you very much feel that much more seen, that much more heard, that much more welcomed, even though you thought you wouldn't know anybody or know anything, and it almost came natural. And again, we have that theme of nature kind of versus nurture, and too often do we apply nurture to our nature, when really we could do well with the opposite and apply some laws of nature to our nurture, which would maybe be a key point in understanding that there's significantly more than 2 genders. Last I read, it was like 72 different variations of intersex, or very much the ways in which people sort of resign themselves to violence and fear because that's just all they've known. When realistically, mathematically, nature optimizes toward growth and toward beauty and toward balance, which is why leaves grow the way that they do, which is why seeds in sunflowers grow the way that they do, which is why oranges stack the way that they do, which is why the calico lines underneath our skin spiral the way that they do. rather than explode. The Two of Diamonds is a reflection. So whatever we're moving toward will ultimately be a reflection of ourselves. And that again comes with our capacity to recognize the shadow and also to share light. Because the light is not just for you. And the shadow is integral in being able to define it. It in fact defines the contrast and the edges. And that is how we are able to see it. Which is so funny because whenever people see me in spaces like that, like woo-woo spaces, and they're like, oh my, you're so much black, you're so dark. Remember there was this painting project at a thing that I went to, and they only had basic paints, basic nonsense colors. And so I made my own black because that's typically how I paint, is I use primary colors and white. And this lady freaked out and was just like, oh my, so much darkness. And I was like, if you think that I am darkness, my friend, then I question whether you have ever known light. And that has continuously become true. Continuously become true. But it's easy for us to point the finger and be like, that's darkness because I don't like it, because it makes me uncomfortable, and because I don't understand it. And because I don't actually know where it comes from. All the more reason to again dig beneath the surface, especially with the assistance of Beta Tauri. It will only help lead us north. And the Comet C will help us to find south. So rather than let that feel tugging between poles, understand the space that you take up in between. Much like I said, and like I say all the time, but there's a lesson in 777 source code breath that goes over this principle of polarity, and ultimately it is neither negative nor positive, it is the space in between. Therefore it is what we do with it. We can point fingers at all the evil in the world, but what are we doing to change it? How is our light affecting others, if that's the case? Because it is not just for ourselves. It is a flowing thing, it is a growing thing. And again, back to the rivers and the waters, it is something to irrigate so as to feed water to the rest of the world. It is mirror, it is reflection, it is polarity, but it is duality and non-duality because of that. Especially with this Nine of Diamonds. It understands non-duality. It wants to be able to extend that understanding. But when we're given new situations, oftentimes we resort to old habits, or resign ourselves to older paradigms, or resign ourselves to somebody else's control, because it's a lot easier to follow somebody else's rules than to actually figure out your own. So let's not be that guy. Let's be this and this, because this is kind of like soft boy, and this is kind of like badass lady. A little soft daddy action and some like tough mama action in a lot of ways. And that's not to say tough love. That is to say an unrelenting learning process where it's not that having is not satisfying. When you're able to wrap your mind around things that are bigger than yourself, the world, other people's needs and suffering and what have you, then you don't have to own to be able to integrate. You don't have to own to be able to exemplify. And in fact, the idea of ownership is a myth, really. In the legal and financial systems, like what is really owned People are operating from paper money and word of mouth, really, because it is a imaginary system. So lean into the imaginary. Lean into the imaginal. Lean into the imaginal, not the imaginary systems. Lean into the imaginal so that your creative capacity can devise something wholly new all together. This is the conspiring of the new and the ancient all at once, especially with this solar eclipse. Alright. We pull a little spirit card and we bridge the gaps. Thank you, my friends, for being here. Appreciate you. Gosh, what a clear sound. Party. Alright, my friends. Round 2. And again, much like we are hanging out, much like there's cards between us, all I ask is that you make your body available to a full breath and you allow your awareness to perceive any sensations that arise. Yes? Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. One last deep breath in. And exhale. Ooh, electric. And 100%, I think when we don't feel like we have anything to prove, when we're not performing, that, integrity, that superficial confidence is able to rise so much more, is able to be called forth to what it's meant to do, to what that energy wants, really, really wants from you, not just from defense mechanism or, offense mechanism, moving too quickly or assuming too much. This is going to be key in grounding and communication, 100%, which is an everyday, game, really. Not an everyday task, but maybe an everyday game. What's the most impactful way that you can communicate? And maybe that means the most impactful way you can communicate, that your feelings are hurt. That impactful not as in the biggest show, but impactful as in the most heard and understood. That is a grounded way to move about it. Because, flipping a table and throwing a shitstorm doesn't really get us where we need to go. And I had to learn this as well, because in situations with bullies in life, I could have played ball and played their game. And instead, I played a bigger game. I played a better game. And it has only ever rewarded me for that, rather than pulled me down to their level or pulled me into their misery. Um, and so consider that in matters of communication or in matters of uh, opposition that feel like they're trying to pull you out of your grounding or feel like they're trying to pull you out of your space. Um, and all the better for it. The more grounded you are in your own inner peace, that's not where it stops. You know, that's not the end milestone. That's not the end of the Nile. There is a galaxy to enter into entirely all its own, which is the ability to teach as well. Where I've been called combative is really just me figuring out how people learn and whether or not they are receptive to learning. And interestingly enough, those that have called me some form of combative ultimately come full circle. And one in particular that I can think of who has called me combative now calls me guru. So, interesting. Interesting what a little humbling and self-reflection can do, huh? Oh, ah, ooh, ah. Okay. Queen of Pentacles, Seven of Swords, Five of Wands, all inverted, and the Lovers upright. Interesting. Interesting. The ways in which we understand the Lovers, my gosh, is so much more than just two as well. It is the integrity that weaves the two together. It is the peace that surrounds them. And so it becomes its own construction in that. And so when we're able to identify love in our hearts rather than just the forlorn or the scorn or the scars from the fire, we're able to emanate such a brighter light, and one that doesn't even need to be perceived or performed to be felt or heard or witnessed in some way, shape, or form. Numerically delineates to a 6. Number of perfection is very much an even flow of reciprocity, which is key in any relationship. Relationship to self, and oscillating understandings, or binary star systems, or non-binary understandings. Bottom of the deck, so important, so integral. Very much makes me also think of the ways in which geometric truths are recurrent themes, and rather than the ways in which we understand one, or one truth and only truth, or what have you, it is very much a triptych of weaving of thoughts. And again, Beta Tauri, the strength of the cord of truth, the strength of the weaving of truth. And in relationships, especially with the rise of like LDS and Mormonism and or Christian nationalism and the ways in which they're forcing themselves on everybody, regardless of consent. It is not a hierarchical system. Even in this, it's not a hierarchical system. It is very much an oscillating truth. And Geometry of Relationships is a video essay I have in 2 parts that can go deeper into it, as far as relationship to self, relationship to others, or being able to identify red flags. But before I get too deep into there, this is also very much stabilization point. Mercury and its relationship to the moon now, and as it progresses, like I said earlier, the moon and Mercury will go conjunct. Mercury will reach its highest altitude, and in inferior solar conjunction, which is essentially interspinning planets, and the ways in which they pass between the moon and the sun at like a closest point and in a straight line. So there's a stable point, there's a grounding point, there's, this isn't just superficial, this is like solid balance. And this is a strong reciprocity. And again, when we weave that truth, it becomes the kind of cord that can hold a bridge up rather than the kind of cord that easily frays. Queen of Pentacles inverted, I think, maybe challenges what our understandings of grounding are. Oftentimes we, I think, associate so much of our capacity for happiness or peace with very literal things, and I think in a lot of ways it's so much more about frequency than it is about the tangible things. If your happiness is derived from a tangible thing, then you do not have happiness. You have addiction, you have substance. You have substance and you have your relationship to the substance. Is a much better way of putting that than addiction. Whereas if you have a relationship to the self, a relationship to, the body and the land that you're on, and then you can find a capacity for regeneration and for witness in just that. And you find the frequency of happiness and of peace regardless of condition. And that's not to say that it is not disturbed or shaken. Inner peace isn't blind to the suffering of the world. In fact, inner peace is that much more called to responsibility to that suffering, is more so called to and recognizing its responsibility toward the peace of others. Because again, it is not just your fire, it is the ways in which we acknowledge the shadow and the ways in which we share that light. And utmost, I think, maybe gratitude, gratitude for where we've been, gratitude for where we want to go, and in that, a great compassion for the self and gratitude for the self that you've come this far, likely with less resources, and that you will be able to do whatever it is that you put your mind to, like you have done before. We have done more and with less. And that can be a seed of inner peace and inner knowing that even when we're given outside circumstances that knock us on our ass, that throw us for a loop, that dizzy us, that we're still able to come back to that point and be like, okay, yes, that sucked, yes, that pissed me off, yes, that's got my blood boiling and got me shaky, but it will not change who I am. It will not change why I'm here. It will not change that I will still find drive and passion for the world, and for the world as I feel like better place is a bad way. I feel like, and the world and its growth. Again, the mathematical and organic capacity for growth and for balance, and our responsibility to. If you maybe want to know more about what I mean about decolonizing the word peace and our responsibility to it, then I do have an essay on just that. However, we're going to stay here. Seven of Swords, Five of Wands, inverted, is very much hurdles that we're jumping, oppositions that we're facing, challenges, again, that hot coal walking scenario, uncomfortable situations, a distrust in the self even, that we have to figure out why or excavate or begin to pick apart so that we have a better understanding of why we move the way that we do, why we think the way that we do, and if those are in fact our thoughts or thoughts that were fed to us from youth. Because many of our thoughts have been. And I know that's been kind of all over the internet too, is like, with files and the ways in which, again, dirty fingers and many pies has actually created and constructed a lot of the disorder and chaos that occurs that has occurred throughout a growing generation, and their understandings of self and desirability, and understandings of fact or superstition, understandings of information or impulse, what is believable, what is not believable, when in fact it was constructed to be unbelievable so that you would not see the truth. That's also what the Bible is. Cherry-picked and consolidated and reworded and retranslated. Hebrew, also very, same thing, especially with the revival of modern Hebrew as opposed to ancient Hebrew, and the ways in which that was translated. It was a carefully modified version of truth so as to create this illusion around the idea. But it is easily penetrable. 100% again, beyond the surface, deep sea monster, in the heart of Scorpio. In so many ways, we're being asked to dig deeper and to pop these bubbles of illusion so that we can see just how much farther we can grow or go or change things around us. Five of Wands is very much the imprisonment of that illusion, and whether or not we're willing to, again, pop it and be able to see outside of it. It's kind of like if somebody, or like blisters. Blisters is a really good version, because I was thinking like space helmets, but you really can't breathe out there. But if you have a blister, which is a wound from fire, if you have a blister, the popping of it seems like it would hurt more. Like if maybe it's your first blister, right? Grows into this big thing, looks like it'd be really painful. Perhaps it's tender, so you think that popping it would be that much more painful. And in fact, popping a blister is like one of the most painless things. Well, the skin is still tender, but it is the burn, not the bubble. And so we pop that, and then we're able to see just how deep the wound is, just how intense the burn is, to what degree, etc., etc. Which, speaking of degrees, Beta Tauri is 3 degrees west of the Milky Way anticenter and 700 times more powerful than the sun. So there is an altogether unknown heat that is brighter, more powerful, that is offering wisdom, that is offering ancient wisdom, that is offering ancient direction for us to be able to turn to, rather than the direction that we've been led to. Again, not just in ancient Egypt, but ancient Egyptian astrology, in the ways that it directly innervates with Telegi or Cherokee or Toltec and Mexica astrology, very much aligns, in which case Aries is a sheep. Aries is impressionable. Aries is in, what's the word I'm looking for? In captivity. In captivity. This is captivity. How do we get out? How do we bust out? How do we break out? God, what's that movie? Superstar with Molly Shannon. I'm busting out, Daddy. That's where we gotta be. And even that, the humor, the laughter, the groundedness, the fearlessness. Strange bird, but you know what? She wasn't performing for anybody but herself. Well, I guess there was a point where she was performing for the dude. But then she learned better. Then she learned that she didn't have to perform for Will Ferrell's character, as funny as he was, and didn't have to perform for popularity. Just had to find her own shine. Gosh, that's such a great movie. I should watch that. That's so funny. What a strange thing to come up. Oh, me, oh my. Yeah, Five of Wands is limits and limitations in so many ways that you don't have to be subservient to. It is an opportunity to adjust and find a new way around. Find a new way out, find a new way around, find a new possibility, find a new thread of weaving to untangle, find a new route of information to excavate, you know, like what terms have not been searched, what has not been explored. Oftentimes the things that we have laughed off rather than at are things that require more of our attention. Okay. All these heavy elements, my friends, let us engage in the cycle of harmonies with each elemental breath, in which case it is not earth, air, fire, water, because though I loved the craft, that is a backmasking of proper conjuring. And so we go fire, earth, air, water. The fire breath would be in through the mouth, clever sipping, and out through the nose, which actually very literally activates nerves in your eyes, directs breath down the bridge of your nose, causing and conjuring focus, especially if you feel like you're lacking that. It brews focus, it brews heat, it brews energy, and allows it to rise. In through the mouth, out through the nose, 3 times. Earth, in through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the nose, so as to open the body and ground that heat in a sustainable way. Ground that energy in a sustainable way, so that it is embodied and so that we can move from strong footing. We do that 3 times. And then we do an air breath, so as to clear preconceived notion, clear the mind, clear the spirit, and make room for that which fits. That which fits more wholly, that which fits more satisfactorily. And that is in through the mouth and out through the mouth. Drawing the tongue out so as to also bring the diaphragm up into the heart space, up into the breath, to unionize the breath, which is very much akin to the lovers and the misconceptions with even the story of Genesis and its mythology. And then do that 3 times. We go to a water breath, akin with all of this water energy, so as to still the waters for the creatures underneath, so as to be able to see clearly, so as to perhaps even disturb any muck, so that it may be arisen and excavated, to rise and to clear. Yes? Down. We do that in through the nose and out through the mouth, elongating that exhale with each round. We do that 3 times, and that will bring us to 12. But we know now that that is not the ticket. In fact, we need that 13. And so we take the breath in through the nose, and we will release a sound, an utteration, a sigh, what have you, or, if all else, an aum. It is not a word, it is not just a sound, it is a frequency, and it is, again, not just this or that, but the many things in between. It is not just a sound either, it is integral, the stillness and the silence that it creates in the body. And so with that, with this breath, may you be able to find the steepest point of your heat, be able to rise it in responsibility, and be able to actualize in it with a clear mind and a clear sense of self, so much so that you can clear a clear path, that you can excavate a clear path, so that you may utilize this energy in an honorable way. Party? Alright. Take a deep breath in through your mouth, sipping the air, opening the palate, the throat, and the shoulders, and driving the exhale up and out through your nose. Perhaps noticing that the air feels to rise behind your eyes, inhaling through the mouth, sipping the air in, and drawing that exhale up and down your nose. Feeling those nerves activate even, perhaps that sight in that third eye. Inhaling through the mouth, and exhaling through the nose. Perhaps feeling warmth rise with it as you do. Now directing in through your nose, opening the palate, the space in the cheeks, the back of the throat, and exhaling through the nose. Feeling the breath fill the body and descend into the belly, much like nourishment, much like satisfaction or grounding. Inhaling through the nose, feeling that openness descend, widening the central channel that breath passes, and exhaling through the nose, feeling the breath consolidate in the body, present, tangible. Inhaling through the nose, and exhaling through the nose. Feeling more embodied. Inhaling through the mouth. Feeling the coolness against the heat that you have built. And drawing the tongue out, exhaling through the mouth. Feeling that diaphragm rise, yeah? Just below the ribs, maybe. Inhaling through the mouth. Feeling the coolness of the air sweep through the mind and drawing the tongue out, exhaling. Perhaps clearing any debris in that central channel or the mind. Inhaling through the mouth. And exhaling through the mouth. Excitement, yes, but we ground. We clear, inhaling through the nose, feeling the space in the mind open and receptive, perhaps even in the cheeks and the jaw, where we hold tension, and exhaling gently, patiently through pursed lips. Inhaling through the nose, and exhaling through the lips, gently, patiently, elongating that exhale as long as you can. Like when you pull the plug on an air mattress and it just goes forever. Inhaling through the nose. And gently, patiently releasing any tension, preconceived notion in the breath. Perhaps feeling it reach your very fingertips or your toes. Perhaps feeling it travel through your spine. And for that final 13th, my friend, inhale through the nose and allow yourself to release any sound, any utterance that the body requires of you. And if you don't know what the body requires yet, we return to an elm, old trusty, always, always a good frequency. Perhaps shaking up any remaining debris and aligning the parts of you. I hope that makes you very aware of where your fire starts. Makes you very aware of your capacity to feel embodied and responsible to it. And makes you that much more confident in being able to move from that space rather than from patterning, preconceived notion, training, indoctrination, or from spikes and spite and quick thinking and forcefulness, rather than from your true power. And so with that, I leave you. Thank you for hanging out and for being here and for listening and being present and receptive. Utmost, that is some of the most valuable things, my friend. Your presence and your receptivity is a tool that will always, always come in handy, that will always reward you for that presence and that awareness. And so with that, I say, Wato ta'anato, shini ashe koyach, shkoista. Thank you from my heart. I appreciate you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again. I will see you next time. Tanata koe.